Hi, welcome back to Videos at the Bill. This is Professor Greenwald again from Public Administration, Government 241. And this will be the last and a very brief video for my public administration class. This will be on the subject of budgeting. I'd like you to look very carefully at your reading assignments from your textbooks on this issue of budgeting. I'd specifically like you to look very carefully at the material in Stillman and Rouse on the federal budget cycle. How does federal budgeting work? I want you to look at that and know that process, please. I'd also like you to know, you'll see identified in the text's 10 principles of sound taxation policy. I'd like you to be familiar with that as well. But when we talk about government budgeting, what it can become more cumbersome, it can become more complicated than is necessary. What you need to know with government budgeting is essentially what is the format that this budgeting uses. In other words, how does the government arrange the numbers to make a budget? How are they laid out, and then how are they viewed? Let's take a look at that subject. And that leads us to the understanding that there are only, I'd say, four forms of budgeting that we have that we really have to address. Let's take a look at number one. First way that we can budget is simply to construct what is known as a line item budget. And to have a line item budget, we simply are identifying everything that's involved with a government program. Everything. Each person, each tablet, each pencil, each pen, each computer, each truck or car, the rent for a building, the maintenance for a building. We identify all the costs and we list them down the sheet of paper. On the left and to the right, we have the cost of each and every item. And we simply add all those costs up, and there we have the cost of a program. It's very cumbersome, to say the least, and doesn't provide much light for any policy analyst to use. All we know are these are all the things that's necessary to run this office, and this is the final figure. This is the price of the operation. So that's it. That's line item budgeting. You find that most organizations of modest or less than modest complexity use a line item budget. We can move on from there to look at program budgeting. In program budgeting, what we do is we take that line item budget and then we pick all the items that are involved with specific programs. So in Pennsylvania, for example, we take all the line items having to do with agriculture. We put them all together and we'd say, aha, this is the program budget for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. All these programs have specifically to do with agriculture and farming, so this would be a program budget for example, Pennsylvania agriculture. We do the same thing with education, the same thing with transportation, same thing with health, same thing with recreation. And what we would be doing is taking that huge line item budget for the whole Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and we would be figuring out or determining which of these lines were allocated to which subject area. And then we would know how much the state or the Commonwealth pays for each subject area in the state budget. So we have a line item budget, we have a program budget. Thirdly, we can conduct what's called a performance budget. And in a performance budget, what we would do is we would be listing what are the parameters, what are the levels of performance that we want to see state government attain. Once we determine what those levels of performance are, then we have to go back and we have to determine what are the resources that are necessary to achieve these levels of performance. And once we have a good idea of what the resources that would be necessary to achieve those performance levels. We list those, and then we have a performance budget. Fourthly and finally, we have something called the ZBB, or a zero-based budget. A zero-based budgeting was originally devised by Peter Peer. His name is spelled P-H-Y-R-R. P-H-Y-R-R. Peter Peer worked for Texas Instruments. And we find that in government, the first large-scale use of zero-based budgeting was done by Jimmy Carter. When President Carter was the governor of Georgia, he introduced ZBB budgeting to state government. And later, when Jimmy Carter was elected as President of the United States, he took zero-based budgeting with him from from Atlanta, Georgia, to Washington, D.C. Now, what is zero-based budgeting and how does it work? Well, we find that with zero-based budgeting, you find that it involves three basic steps, if I can use this as a reference. You find that all current programs and all proposed programs, they are described in great detail and they are analyzed in documents that are called decision packages. Then, secondly, the decision packages are ranked through benefit cost analysis. Through that evaluation that you do in the first step, that leads to the benefit cost analysis, and the order that these programs can be ranked in is all based on a benefit cost analysis of the decision packages. Thirdly and finally, the resources are allocated in regard to, or in reference to, the ranking that's done. So this is, excuse me, this is the third and final, the fourth and final way that we can organize our budget. We can do it in a zero-based budgetary manner. You find that this final method, is a bit difficult to use every year. Jimmy Carter said he was going to bring it to Washington with him, and he was going to use it every year. I remember reading that, in fact, in the spring of 1976 in U.S. News and World Report. The problem with that is that it's very, very difficult to do this kind of analysis every year for every program over and over and over. Sometimes this type of analysis is only done once every 2 or 3 years, but it's very difficult to do this every year because it requires a lot of manpower and a lot of energy and a lot of money to do it. So, again, the forms of budgeting we have are zero-based budgeting, program budgeting, performance budgeting, zero-based budgeting. Now, there's another concept that I want you to be aware of when we look at budgeting, and that concept is the existence of something called the base. What is the base in budgeting? The base is simply how much money did we have last year? How much money did every program have in the year gone by? There are many people that do budgeting or think budgeting should be done by simply looking at the base. How much money did you have last year? And then determining what the inflation rate would be for society in that upcoming year. And then they'd simply take the base and they'd increase it by the amount of inflation, and voila, you have your budget figure for the next year. There are lots of unimaginative, uncreative, and lackluster public servants who believe that budgets should be calculated in this way. That might be okay for a year or two in certain situations, but certainly not the best way to do budgeting. But I wanted you to be aware of the existence of this, and I wanted you to know certainly what the base is. It's a very important concept as we go about budgeting, okay? All right. Well, again, if you have questions, give me a call. I do want you to look in your textbook, be familiar with those 10 principles of sound taxation policy, and I do want you to look at how the federal budget cycle works. Okay? All right. Well, good luck on the final exam as I send that out to you in the next day or two, and you'll have time to think about that, ponder it, and prepare your finals. I look forward to them, and I look forward to talking with you guys in the future and working with you in the future. It's been a pleasure to have you all in my class. I'll see you on campus soon. Talk to you later.